US Defense Secretary Leon Panetta is certain Assad days are numbered. Isn't it too early to suggest that, given that he still has the support of many Syrians?
Absolutely. What you have in the United States now is you really have a conflict between two policies. On the one hand, you have Susan Rice, Samantha Powers, President Obama in a very aggressive regime change mode to get rid of the president of Syria. On the other hand, if you look at General Dempsey's comments, he continues to say that this is not the right moment for the military to intervene, that we need to have diplomacy, we need to find other ways to resolve the crisis. So what the Secretary of Defense Panetta is essentially being affected by this Susan Rice-led regime change faction, and his statements today are counterproductive to actually the future development of Syria.
And he's not listening to the military by the sounds of things, because he said today if Assad wants to protect himself and his family, he better get the hell out now. That's the quote. I mean, that sounds like a military threat, doesn't it?
It certainly is a threat, and if you look at what he is saying, that it's again paradoxical, because he's saying we have to keep the Syrian military, the Ba'ath military, in check, in power, when President Bashar Assad is removed. But yet, the conditions on the ground, the U.S. is supporting absolute chaos and destruction. So there's not going to be any stability. It is now publicly known, and it's been publicized on the front pages of the New York Times, that Al-Qaeda is very aggressive in this Syrian opposition. And in fact, Al-Qaeda wants to have a Iraqi-Syrian Sunni Al-Qaeda force to take on the Shia. So this is going to cause massive chaos and destruction in the country. And then Secretary Panetta says, no, let's try to keep the military enforced to not repeat, admittedly, the most stupid mistake we made in Iraq. But it shows you that there's no thinking, there's no forward policy coming from the U.S. to help this situation.
And it's ironic, isn't it, when he says keep the military in power, when at the same time the US are accusing the military of massacring its own people, along with the aggressions committed by Al-Qaeda.
Exactly. It's a confused, contradictory policy. I don't think Panetta himself has a policy. As I said, I think you've got this regime change faction, and the real concern we should all have is the bigger question, which is that Russia in particular has said they will not allow regime change, and that if Susan Rice and others go outside of the UN, this is a violation of the United Nations Charter itself, and therefore they will defend the notion of sovereignty beyond Syria, and this could bring us to the danger of war and nuclear war, and the policy of President Putin has remained absolutely steadfast now for several months on this very question of the danger of war if Syria and other countries' sovereignty is violated.
And yet, there he is saying the mistakes of the Iraq war must not be repeated in a post-Assad Syria. Just how realistic is that when you're saying he hasn't got a policy now, and there doesn't seem to be a policy for after Assad goes?
Correct. If you remember what happened in the Iraq War, this idiot Bremer went in and disbanded the Ba'ath Party and the military. And this was the stupidest move you could make, and it did cause years and years of chaos, which Iraq has not achieved stability since. But your point is correct. How do you say we should get rid of the president and get rid of the government, and yet we're going to keep the military intact, and yet our major allies in the streets is Al-Qaeda, and it's Al-Qaeda is supposed to be our #1 enemy from the 2001 attacks on the United States. What you really have is you have Saudi-funded, and other countries are funding not only the Muslim Brotherhood, but the more extreme Salafist, and Al-Qaeda gets money from the Saudi charities, and that is the force that we in the United States are stupidly allying ourselves with. So you couldn't ask for a more confused and silly policy, except it brings about a danger of war, which makes it very serious and not so silly.
Lawrence Freeman, editor of the Executive Intelligence Review magazine, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts. Always good to hear what you have to say.